He's long gone. Amanda's words echoed in Evelyn's mind like a cold wind sweeping through an empty house, and for a moment, she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Standing in the living room, the familiar scent of her son's cologne lingering faintly on the sofa cushions, Evelyn felt a mixture of disbelief and a growing unease she could not shake. Just yesterday, the house had seemed alive with laughter, the soft hum of family conversations and the clatter of dishes from the kitchen, but today it felt hollow, as if every wall held a secret it was too scared to tell. Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she clutched the folded memorial program she had kept in her pocket, the paper crisp but heavy with meaning, and she thought back to the countless mornings she had poured coffee and breakfast for her family, each cup and plate a silent testament to her devotion. She remembered her son's laughter echoing down the hallway, the warmth of family dinners filled with chatter, and she realized that beneath the surface of these ordinary days, something had shifted, something that left her standing alone in a space that should have been full of comfort. Evelyn took a slow, measured breath, letting her eyes scan the room as if the familiar furniture and framed photographs could offer her some guidance or perhaps an answer to the sudden void Amanda's words had created. Every photo, every memento seemed to mock her gently, reminding her of the love and care she had invested over decades, and yet now she was confronted with a stark, unsettling reality that challenged everything she had believed about trust and family. She moved to the window and looked out at the front yard where the sunlight glinted off the freshly raked leaves, the autumn air crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of distant pine trees, and for a moment, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her emotions. Shock, confusion, and a deep, quiet sadness. Evelyn's mind raced as she tried to piece together the fragments of recent days, the phone calls she had received, the fleeting comments at family gatherings, the subtle hints she had brushed off too easily, and now, standing here, the patterns that once seemed innocuous began to form a troubling picture. She thought about Amanda's carefully curated smiles, the way her words often held double meanings, and Evelyn recognized a shadow of something she had long feared. A betrayal that was both intimate and painful. With each passing second, Evelyn felt a growing resolve rise within her, a quiet determination to navigate this upheaval with poise and clarity, understanding that while the shock of the moment was sharp and almost unbearable, her response would define her strength and dignity. She imagined the conversations ahead, the subtle confrontations that would require both wit and patience, and she felt a flicker of hope that she could uncover the truth and protect the memory of her son, while maintaining her own integrity. The sunlight shifted across the living room floor, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in quiet reflection of her thoughts, and Evelyn realized that this was not merely a moment of loss but a turning point. A chance to confront hidden truths, to observe carefully, and to respond with the quiet power that had carried her through so many trials before. As she straightened her shoulders and smoothed the folds of her cardigan, Evelyn's gaze returned to Amanda, measuring not anger but understanding, preparing to face the complex emotions and delicate interactions that would inevitably follow, fully aware that the way she chose to move forward would echo far beyond this single shocking statement. Evelyn walked slowly to the kitchen, the crisp autumn light spilling through the window and illuminating the polished oak floors, and she noticed the faint hum of the refrigerator, a reminder of normalcy in a day that felt anything but normal. She poured herself a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling her senses and grounding her in the familiar rituals that had always brought her a sense of calm. As she stirred in a touch of cream and sugar, she thought about the past few weeks, the small moments that had seemed insignificant at the time but now appeared as pieces of a puzzle she had not realized she was assembling. Each birthday party, each Sunday dinner, each casual remark that Amanda had made seemed to carry a hidden weight, a subtle shift in tone that now made sense in retrospect. Evelyn sipped her coffee slowly, allowing herself to remember the laughter that had once filled the house, the way her son had joked with Amanda and the warmth that had seemed so genuine. She recalled the holidays, the careful decorations she had hung each year, the effort she had put into creating a welcoming environment, and a pang of disappointment tugged at her heart as she realized how differently some family members now seemed to behave. Evelyn took a deep breath, reminding herself that the emotions she felt were valid, and that taking the time to reflect was part of the process of understanding the situation fully. She walked over to the window, looking out at the neatly trimmed lawn where the morning dew still clung to the grass, sparkling like tiny jewels in the early light, and she noticed the gentle sway of the maple tree in the breeze, a quiet reminder that life continued even when faced with unexpected challenges. Thoughts of her son's hobbies and interests came to mind. The books he had loved, the weekend fishing trips, the laughter that had followed him everywhere he went. And Evelyn realized that these memories were treasures she could hold on to, even as she navigated the complexities of family dynamics. She began to write notes in a small leather journal, recording observations, questions, and feelings, a personal roadmap that would help her approach upcoming conversations with clarity and confidence. Each sentence she wrote was deliberate, a way to process the mixture of shock, sadness, and growing determination that had settled in her chest. Evelyn then prepared a simple breakfast, setting a plate with eggs, toast, and fruit on the table, and as she arranged the food, she considered how to engage Amanda in a conversation that might reveal more truths without escalating tension. She reminded herself to listen attentively, to observe body language, and to note any inconsistencies or hints that could shed light on Amanda's intentions. The kitchen was quiet except for the occasional clink of a spoon against a cup, and Evelyn found herself appreciating the small rhythms of life that offered a sense of stability amidst uncertainty. She reflected on her own resilience, the decades she had spent nurturing her family, managing challenges, and finding ways to maintain harmony, and she felt a quiet pride in knowing that she could face this new chapter with composure. Evelyn imagined the conversations ahead, rehearsing questions and responses in her mind, considering the best way to approach difficult topics while remaining respectful and composed. The morning light shifted, highlighting the textures of the wooden cabinets and the subtle sheen of the countertops, and Evelyn allowed herself a moment to enjoy the visual comfort of her surroundings. She then reviewed the calendar for the week, noting appointments and tasks, a gentle reminder that life required attention to practical matters even as emotional challenges loomed. Evelyn thought about calling a close friend for advice and support, someone who knew her son and could provide perspective, and she appreciated the thought of having a trusted confidant to help navigate complex feelings. She sat back in her chair, sipping her coffee once more, feeling a mixture of apprehension and quiet determination, understanding that the coming days would require both patience and insight. The soft light of mid-morning filled the room, casting shadows that danced across the floor, and Evelyn felt a sense of readiness forming within her, a readiness to face conversations, to seek clarity, and to protect the memory of her son while maintaining her dignity and composure. Every small action, from sipping her coffee to organizing her notes, was part of a deliberate strategy to approach the unfolding situation with thoughtfulness and care, ensuring that her responses would reflect wisdom and calm rather than impulse. As the day progressed, Evelyn allowed herself moments to pause, breathe, and reflect, understanding that each thoughtful decision would contribute to navigating the delicate family dynamics ahead, while preserving her own sense of strength and integrity. Evelyn set the coffee cup gently on the counter and let her gaze wander across the room, noticing the familiar details that had always brought her comfort, the framed photographs capturing moments of laughter, holidays, and quiet afternoons spent together, each image now carrying a bittersweet weight she could not ignore. She thought about the careful planning she had done over the years, from family gatherings to small celebrations, and how much effort she had invested to create a sense of warmth and belonging, and yet she recognized the subtle distance that had grown between herself and Amanda, a gap filled with unspoken tension and guarded expressions. The morning light shifted slightly, illuminating the pages of her journal that lay open on the table, filled with notes and observations, each line a step toward understanding the underlying dynamics that had begun to shape her family life in unexpected ways. Evelyn reflected on the recent conversations she had observed, noting the nuances in tone, the fleeting hesitations, and the subtle shifts in body language that often revealed more than words could convey. She remembered her son's favorite chair by the window, the one that caught the sunlight just right for reading, and she imagined him there, smiling, a presence both comforting and poignant in the quiet of the room. She walked slowly toward the window, placing a hand lightly on the sill, feeling the cool wood beneath her fingers, and allowed herself to take a deep breath, grounding her thoughts and emotions, recognizing that clarity often came from patience and attentive observation. Evelyn considered the next steps, how she might approach Amanda with questions that were both gentle and precise, designed to encourage honesty without escalating conflict, and she rehearsed possible dialogues in her mind, weighing each word carefully to maintain composure and dignity. The garden outside caught her attention, the early spring blooms beginning to show color among the neatly trimmed hedges, a reminder of continuity and growth even in times of uncertainty, and Evelyn felt a subtle reassurance that life continued to offer opportunities for reflection and action. She thought about the family rituals, the Sunday breakfasts, and the shared meals that had been a cornerstone of connection, and she realized that maintaining these routines could provide a stabilizing force, a framework within which difficult conversations could occur with calm and respect. Evelyn returned to the kitchen table, her journal open before her, and began to make a list of topics she wished to address, carefully prioritizing clarity and understanding over confrontation, knowing that the approach she chose would shape the outcome and influence the atmosphere of the home. She sipped her coffee once more, feeling the warmth spread through her, and allowed a small smile to cross her face as she considered her own resilience, the skills she had honed over decades of nurturing her family and navigating complex situations with intelligence and grace. Each decision, each observation, and each measured action contributed to a growing sense of preparedness, enabling Evelyn to approach the day with a balance of attentiveness and composure, confident that she could handle the emerging challenges while preserving her sense of integrity and the cherished memories of her son. As the minutes passed, she felt the quiet strength that came from reflection, from thoughtful consideration of both the past and the present, and she prepared herself mentally to face Amanda with insight and empathy, ready to observe carefully, respond thoughtfully, and navigate the intricate dynamics of her family life with patience, wisdom, and unwavering dignity. Evelyn placed her journal carefully on the kitchen table and straightened the napkins beside the coffee cups, appreciating the small order in her surroundings as a source of calm. She reflected on the patterns she had observed in Amanda's behavior, noticing how subtle gestures and carefully chosen words revealed a layer of calculation beneath a seemingly pleasant demeanor. Each interaction, each brief exchange at breakfast or during casual conversation, now held a deeper significance, and Evelyn made a mental note to observe with patience and attention, understanding that insight often came from careful watching rather than immediate action. She poured herself a second cup of coffee and carried it to the living room, settling into the armchair by the window where morning sunlight highlighted the textures of the upholstery, and she allowed herself a quiet moment to breathe and collect her thoughts. The garden outside offered a gentle distraction, with early blossoms and green shoots signaling the steady rhythm of life beyond the walls of the home, and Evelyn felt a renewed sense of perspective that balance could be found even amidst complex emotions. She considered the upcoming family gathering, thinking about seating arrangements, the flow of conversation, and the opportunities to gently probe for clarity while maintaining a composed and dignified presence. Evelyn reflected on the ways she had nurtured connections with her family over the years, the shared meals, the holiday traditions, the simple routines that had created bonds of trust and warmth, and she resolved to preserve these connections even while addressing underlying tensions. The quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint sounds from the street reminded her that life continued, that the ordinary moments persisted alongside the extraordinary ones, and she found reassurance in the continuity of daily routines. Evelyn made a brief call to a close friend, sharing carefully chosen words about her observations and seeking perspective, feeling a sense of relief in articulating her thoughts and receiving an empathetic response. As she hung up the phone, she reviewed her notes once more, refining questions and considering the best ways to introduce topics that required delicacy and attentiveness. The afternoon sun shifted, casting soft shadows across the room, and Evelyn felt a calm determination settle within her, a readiness to engage thoughtfully and with clarity in the interactions that awaited her. Each step she took, from arranging the coffee table to rehearsing questions in her mind, was part of a deliberate process to approach the family dynamics with insight and composure, ensuring that her responses would reflect intelligence, patience, and emotional strength. She allowed herself a moment to observe the small details of the room, the polished surfaces, the carefully framed photographs, the subtle glow of light on familiar objects, and she recognized that these moments of mindfulness helped her maintain a centered perspective. Evelyn sipped her coffee slowly, feeling warmth and steadiness, and understood that by combining careful observation with deliberate, thoughtful action, she could navigate the delicate balance of family relationships with grace, ensuring that honesty, respect, and dignity guided her every interaction as she moved forward through the day. Evelyn moved from the living room to the hallway, her footsteps quiet against the polished hardwood floors, and she allowed herself to take a slow, steadying breath, Feeling the calm she had cultivated throughout the morning settle around her like a protective cloak, she paused by the framed photograph of her son on the console table, his smile captured in a moment of unguarded happiness, and she felt a mixture of longing and determination, recognizing that honoring his memory required both reflection and action. Evelyn turned her attention to the stack of letters and bills she had organized earlier, carefully reviewing the details with a meticulous eye, noting any inconsistencies or unusual patterns that could offer insight into Amanda's recent behavior and her interactions with family matters. The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, casting soft light across the room, highlighting the textures of the upholstery and the warm tones of the wooden furniture, and Evelyn appreciated the quiet elegance of her surroundings as she gathered her thoughts. She thought about the conversations she planned to have, the questions that needed careful phrasing, and the ways she could encourage openness without creating tension or conflict, understanding that subtlety and patience were essential in navigating delicate family dynamics. As she sipped a cup of tea she had prepared earlier, Evelyn reflected on the moments that had brought her here, the small signs she had previously overlooked, and the realization that trust, once strained, required deliberate effort to rebuild or clarify. She considered the role of other family members, how their perceptions and loyalties might influence discussions, and the need to remain composed and thoughtful while engaging with them, ensuring that her actions reflected dignity and clarity, rather than impulsiveness. Evelyn spent a few moments near the window, watching the gentle sway of the branches outside, and she allowed herself to observe the world in a measured way, finding reassurance in the continuity of nature as a metaphor for stability and perspective amidst personal challenges. She returned to the dining area and reviewed the seating arrangements in her mind, thinking about how to position herself to observe interactions while maintaining a calm, welcoming presence, and she noted that small gestures, tone of voice, and facial expressions often conveyed more than words alone. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling the warmth of the afternoon sunlight on her face, and she reflected on the importance of memory, of holding on to the positive moments that defined her son's life, while simultaneously preparing to address the more complex and unsettling aspects of her family situation. She reviewed her notes again, checking for clarity and completeness, and considered the best approach to discuss observations with Amanda, in a manner that encouraged honesty, mutual respect, and careful listening. Every movement, every considered action, and every reflection contributed to a growing sense of readiness, allowing Evelyn to approach interactions with confidence, empathy, and discernment. She reminded herself that patience, observation, and thoughtful communication were her greatest tools, and that maintaining composure and integrity in every encounter would set the tone for productive and meaningful dialogue. As the afternoon continued to unfold, Evelyn felt a quiet strength rising within her, a sense of preparedness that came from deliberate reflection, and she embraced the understanding that measured, thoughtful steps would allow her to navigate the complexities of her family relationships while preserving the dignity, respect, and cherished memories that were central to her life and the legacy of her son. Evelyn spent the early afternoon organizing her thoughts and reviewing her notes once more, the quiet of the house wrapping around her like a gentle embrace, providing the space she needed to carefully consider every detail of the recent interactions with Amanda. She walked slowly to the bookshelf and ran her fingers along the spines of familiar titles, feeling a sense of continuity and comfort in the presence of stories and knowledge that had been part of her life for decades. The soft light from the large living room window illuminated the room in a warm glow, highlighting the polished wood surfaces and the neat arrangement of photographs and memorabilia that told the story of her family's history. Evelyn reflected on the subtle changes she had noticed over the past few weeks, the shifts in Amanda's demeanor, the careful phrasing of comments, and the small, almost imperceptible gestures that suggested a layer of complexity and perhaps concealment. She poured herself another cup of tea, the warmth of the liquid providing a moment of grounding as she allowed herself to consider the family dynamics in greater depth, understanding that insight required patience, careful observation, and thoughtful reflection. Sitting by the window with her journal open, Evelyn began to write, noting down not only her observations but also the feelings they evoked, recognizing that understanding both facts and emotions was essential to approaching the situation with clarity and composure. She reviewed previous entries, connecting moments that at first seemed isolated and now formed a pattern of subtle tension and guarded interaction, and she made note of questions that could be posed in ways that were gentle yet precise, aimed at encouraging openness without creating defensiveness. The sounds of the neighborhood reached her ears softly, the distant hum of a lawnmower, birds chirping in the trees, and the occasional passing car, and Evelyn felt a sense of continuity, a reminder that life moved forward outside the walls of her home, even as she navigated the complexities within. She thought about the upcoming family gathering later that week, imagining the flow of conversation, the placement of chairs, the ways in which she could maintain a composed presence while observing and listening carefully to interactions, and she considered how to create moments that encouraged honesty and clarity without confrontation. Evelyn took a deep breath, feeling a sense of quiet determination growing within her, and reminded herself that patience and thoughtful engagement were her greatest tools, allowing her to respond with insight and dignity rather than reactionary emotion. She considered the importance of her own composure, how her calm presence could set the tone for the room and influence the behavior of others, and she reflected on the balance between maintaining warmth and establishing boundaries, a combination that required both sensitivity and confidence. The sunlight shifted subtly across the floor, illuminating different corners of the room and casting soft shadows that added depth and texture to her surroundings, and Evelyn allowed herself to pause for a moment to appreciate the beauty and stability of the space around her. She reflected on the memories of her son, the laughter, the shared moments, the quiet afternoons spent together, and how those memories could guide her in maintaining perspective, ensuring that her actions were rooted in love and remembrance rather than reaction. Evelyn then reviewed her journal once more, making careful notes on strategies for the interaction she anticipated, considering timing, phrasing, and the emotional cues that could guide a constructive dialogue. She sipped her tea slowly, feeling warmth and focus, and recognized that her ability to approach the situation with clarity and patience was a reflection of the resilience she had cultivated over a lifetime of nurturing, problem-solving, and guiding her family through both joy and challenge. Each small decision, from arranging the seating to preparing her questions thoughtfully, contributed to a growing sense of readiness, ensuring that she could navigate the family gathering with poise, observe with attentiveness, and respond with both intelligence and empathy. As the afternoon light gradually softened toward early evening, Evelyn felt a quiet confidence that she could maintain composure and integrity, guiding her actions with wisdom, sensitivity, and the steady assurance that came from careful preparation and thoughtful reflection. Evelyn sat in the living room as the evening light softened, casting warm golden hues across the polished floors and the carefully arranged furniture, and she felt a sense of calm focus settle over her, a readiness to engage thoughtfully in the family interactions that awaited her. She reviewed the notes in her journal once more, tracing the points she intended to discuss and considering the subtle ways in which she could encourage openness and honesty without creating tension or discomfort. Each observation she had recorded, each reflection on Amanda's behavior and the interactions she had witnessed, now formed a cohesive understanding of the underlying dynamics at play. Evelyn allowed herself a quiet moment to observe the familiar surroundings, the framed photographs capturing happy memories, the ornaments and mementos that told the story of her family's life together, and she recognized the grounding effect of these tangible reminders of connection, providing stability as she prepared for the coming conversations. She sipped a cup of herbal tea, feeling warmth and comfort, and thought about the careful balance she needed to maintain, blending attentiveness, patience, and gentle assertiveness, understanding that her response would set the tone for interactions and influence the clarity and honesty she hoped to achieve. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sounds of neighbors winding down their day created a background of normalcy that allowed Evelyn to center herself, reminding her that everyday rhythms continued even amidst complex emotional landscapes. She walked slowly to the window, looking out at the garden where the evening light illuminated the fresh green shoots of spring, and she allowed herself to reflect on her son's presence in her memory, the laughter, the shared meals, and the small traditions that had created bonds of love and understanding. Evelyn considered the subtle cues she had noticed over the past days, the careful choice of words, the hesitation in tone, the avoidance of certain topics, and she recognized that these details were crucial for approaching discussions with Amanda thoughtfully and strategically. She rehearsed questions in her mind, phrasing them in ways that were respectful, clear, and inviting, ensuring that her approach would encourage dialogue rather than defensiveness, and she considered how to observe Amanda's responses closely, noting not only what was said but the manner in which it was communicated. Evelyn returned to her chair by the window and let her thoughts flow freely onto the pages of her journal, writing not only about actions and observations, but also the emotions that accompanied them, recognizing that understanding her own responses was as important as interpreting the behavior of others. She imagined the upcoming family gathering, thinking about seating arrangements, timing, and the ways in which she could create an atmosphere of calm, respect, and openness, while also remaining vigilant for opportunities to clarify misunderstandings or gently expose inconsistencies. The garden outside shifted subtly with the evening breeze, leaves moving lightly and casting playful shadows across the lawn, and Evelyn felt a renewed sense of perspective, understanding that observing carefully and responding thoughtfully could guide the interactions toward constructive clarity. She sipped her tea again, feeling the warmth and focus it brought, and reflected on the balance she needed to strike between maintaining empathy and upholding boundaries, knowing that measured, deliberate actions would allow her to navigate the emotional terrain with dignity and composure. Evelyn allowed herself a moment to visualize the conversations ahead, considering each possible response, the tone of voice she would use, and the gestures that would support her words, creating a mental map that would guide her in maintaining authority and calm presence without aggression or confrontation. She noted the subtle ways in which humor, gentle observation, and shared memories could be employed to foster connection and reduce tension, ensuring that the environment remained conducive to honest communication. As twilight deepened, casting longer shadows across the room, Evelyn felt a quiet strength and readiness, the confidence that careful preparation, thoughtful reflection, and patient observation provided, allowing her to engage with Amanda and the rest of the family in ways that honored her son's memory, while maintaining her own dignity and composure. Each decision she made, from the positioning of her chair to the phrasing of questions, was part of a deliberate strategy to encourage clarity, foster openness, and protect the integrity of family relationships, demonstrating the intelligence, patience, and insight that had guided her throughout her life, and would continue to support her in navigating the complexities of this delicate situation. Evelyn remained seated by the window, the evening light softening into a gentle twilight, and she allowed herself to reflect on the day with a sense of measured calm, appreciating the quiet moments that offered clarity amidst emotional complexity. She reviewed the notes she had taken throughout the day, each observation meticulously recorded, and considered how these insights could guide her approach in the interactions to come. The room around her, familiar and comforting, seemed to encourage reflection, with the warm tones of the wooden furniture and the soft glow of the lamps creating an environment conducive to thoughtful contemplation. Evelyn sipped her tea, feeling the warmth spread through her, and she allowed her mind to wander through memories of her son, recalling the simple pleasures and shared experiences that had formed the foundation of their family life. She thought about the upcoming dinner, imagining the flow of conversation, the seating arrangements, and the ways she could maintain composure while subtly observing Amanda's responses and behavior. Evelyn considered the questions she intended to ask, phrasing them carefully in her mind to encourage openness and honesty while avoiding confrontation, and she rehearsed ways to listen attentively, noting not only the words spoken but also the tone, pauses, and body language that conveyed deeper meaning. The garden outside, touched by the soft glow of twilight, provided a serene backdrop, and Evelyn allowed herself a moment to find reassurance in the continuity and calm of nature, drawing strength from the rhythm of life outside the walls of her home. She reflected on the balance she had cultivated over decades of nurturing her family, managing challenges, and maintaining harmony, and she recognized that these skills would guide her in navigating the delicate dynamics she faced now. Evelyn reviewed her journal again, connecting the patterns she had observed over the past days, the subtle shifts in behavior, and the small indications of concealed intentions, and she made careful notes on how to approach these insights with tact and composure. She thought about the importance of preserving dignity and warmth, maintaining a presence that was both observant and empathetic, and she reminded herself that measured patience often revealed truths more effectively than direct confrontation. As twilight deepened, casting soft shadows across the room, Evelyn considered the role of other family members and how their perceptions and reactions could influence the dynamics of the evening, and she planned strategies to engage with them in ways that encouraged harmony while remaining attentive to underlying tensions. She visualized the conversations, imagining how subtle expressions, gentle tones, and thoughtful questions could elicit meaningful responses, allowing her to navigate the evening with intelligence, insight, and emotional grace. Evelyn allowed herself to feel a sense of quiet confidence, recognizing that careful preparation, reflection, and attentive observation provided a foundation for meaningful dialogue, and that her calm presence could influence the atmosphere in positive and constructive ways. She sipped her tea once more, feeling grounded, and reminded herself that each action, each word, and each subtle gesture contributed to the clarity, understanding, and respect she hoped to foster within her family interactions. As the room grew dimmer and the evening deepened, Evelyn felt the steady reassurance that thoughtful preparation, patient observation, and measured engagement would allow her to navigate the complexities of the gathering ahead with composure, preserving her dignity, honoring her son's memory, and ensuring that honesty, insight, and empathy guided every interaction in the hours to come. Evelyn stood and stretched gently, feeling the quiet weight of the evening settle over the house, and she took a deep breath, allowing herself a moment to center her thoughts before the family gathering began. She moved slowly to the dining room, arranging chairs and adjusting place settings with care, mindful of the small details that created a sense of order and welcome. Each item she touched, the polished silverware, the folded napkins, the delicate china, reminded her of the tradition she had maintained for decades, a testament to the consistency and care that had always been part of her role within the family. She considered the flow of conversation, how to listen attentively while gently guiding discussions to ensure clarity and understanding, and she reviewed the questions she had carefully prepared, phrasing them in ways that encouraged openness without provoking defensiveness. Evelyn paused by the window to watch the garden in the fading light, noting the subtle movements of the trees and the soft colors of twilight, and she found comfort in the constancy of nature, even as family dynamics shifted and evolved. She reflected on her son's memory, allowing herself to feel both the warmth of cherished recollections and the resolve to navigate the present with composure and intelligence, understanding that honoring him meant maintaining dignity and thoughtful engagement. As she returned to the table, she rehearsed in her mind the subtle cues to observe, the tone of voice, slight hesitations, and gestures that often revealed more than words, and she considered how to respond thoughtfully, blending patience, empathy, and quiet authority. The house was filled with a gentle stillness, punctuated only by the occasional sound from the street and the faint hum of the refrigerator, and Evelyn appreciated the calm as an opportunity to reflect, plan, and prepare for meaningful interactions. She arranged her notes beside her chair, reviewing observations and insights from previous days, connecting patterns in behavior and anticipating how conversations might unfold. Each reflection reinforced her understanding that careful preparation, thoughtful observation, and measured engagement were essential to guiding family interactions with clarity, respect, and composure. Evelyn sipped her tea once more, feeling warmth and steadiness, and considered how to balance empathy with the need for clarity, ensuring that her approach fostered understanding and honesty while maintaining boundaries. She allowed herself to visualize the sequence of interactions, imagining ways to encourage openness through gentle inquiry and attentive listening, and she reminded herself that her presence, calm demeanor, and thoughtful communication could influence the tone of the evening in positive ways. The twilight deepened, casting long, soft shadows across the dining room, and Evelyn felt a quiet confidence in her readiness, a sense that the preparation, reflection, and observation she had undertaken would enable her to navigate the complexities of the gathering with grace. She focused on maintaining a steady, composed presence, allowing her to listen, observe, and respond with insight and empathy, while keeping her own dignity and the memory of her son central to her actions. Every movement, every word considered, every subtle gesture contributed to a deliberate approach, ensuring that she could manage the delicate balance of family relationships with patience, wisdom, and emotional intelligence. Evelyn inhaled deeply, letting the calm settle within her, and recognized that by maintaining attentiveness, thoughtful engagement, and measured response, she could foster meaningful dialogue, preserve her integrity, and guide the interactions of the evening toward clarity, respect, and understanding, honoring both her own values and the memory of her son in every interaction.